Welcome to Time to Press Pause, real-life stories from the C-suite. I'm your host, Ellen Williams, CEO of The Salient Strategist, and today we're speaking with Henry Poydar. Henry is the founder and CEO of Steady, a predictive coordination platform for product teams. Henry has built successful software products and led high-performing software teams for over 2 decades. His rich professional history includes engineering and leadership roles in a variety of organizations, from remote-first bootstrapped businesses and venture-backed startups to publicly traded companies with global distribution teams. Welcome, Henry. I'm so happy to have you here today on Time to Press Pause.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you because you and I met back in 2011 in my Constant Contact days, and they had just acquired Bantam Networks, which was a CRM, and I am, all things CRM. And I was really excited to talk with you about it, and you were very generous with your time.
Well, yeah, that was, that leads me to that period of my life is sort of when my time to press pause came about. So it's a good lead into that story.
Oh, awesome. Well,
Yeah.
by all means,
Yeah.
Tell us your press pause story.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I've been in tech for 25 years. I've been a developer. I've been VP of engineering, CTO, worked in management consulting firms, worked in startups, but most of my experience is in early stage startups. And I was working for a CRM company that I co-founded and was the CTO of in the early 2010s called Bantam CRM. And we were acquired by Constant Contact. And I went to work for Constant Contact and I opened up their New York office, which is where we met. And they subsequently opened another office in New York, but we opened the first New York office, right? And I worked on a giant systems integration project that I think at the time I described to you as heart surgery, open heart surgery for 3 years for the company. So I was in New York, but I was working with a team from San Francisco, from Boston, from Florida, and I think a couple other places. And it was just a giant, big systems integration project. And so after 3 years, after we mostly got that project done, I left Constant Contact. And I had a moment where I was, had just been working for years and years and years. And I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And my experience from Constant Contact really informed that because I knew that I wanted to be back in software. I knew I wanted to build a new product, but I also knew I wanted to be a little bit closer to the metal that I was at Constant Contact. And what I mean by that is I wanted to build something with my own hands, like go back to coding again, go back to designing again, go back to talking directly to customers again, and all of those things. I also wanted to do something independently and without taking on venture capital, something where I could really remain 100% in control. And the other piece, which I got out of Constant Contact, is I really wanted to solve a problem that I knew intimately. So I wanted to solve a problem for basically myself. And so I took all those things. I sat for a while and tried to figure out what I was going to do and who I need to do it with, and created an application called Status Hero. And Status Hero was born out of my experience at Constant Contact, where I would come into the New York office, and I don't know if you remember that, it was a big open plan. And at the end of the office, there would be a giant whiteboard, and the whiteboard would have like this huge, roadmap on it of this multi-year thing that we were trying to do, this big, hairy problem we were trying to solve. And there would be, chairs scattered around the office, and some of the chairs would have jackets on them, right? So the context was I was responsible for this huge, big project. Projects get done by people, and I was working with those people in the office, and they were inhabiting these chairs that had jackets on them, but I didn't know who they were, what they were doing. I mean, I knew who they were, but the problem was trying to figure out the context for each piece of the problem that we were trying to solve and the people who were trying to solve it with. And so I developed a product after I left Constant Contact called Status Hero. And the job of Status Hero was to simply ask everyone in an org or on a team what their intentions are for the next day or two for the work that they're doing. So instead of, focusing on what happened, focus on what people intend to do, and therefore establish some trust and autonomy with how they intend to solve a problem without being command and control, and also avoiding an endless status meeting. I mean, at Constant Contact, we had this problem. I'm not sure if you were exposed to it, but we'd have these massive stand-up meetings and they take forever. And how could we solve for some of that with async means so that we could save the meeting time for the real work, the real collaboration that needed to happen. I know you asked me for one time I pressed pause. And so that was, I think, the first time, but there's a second time I pressed pause on this because I ran Status Hero on my own for 5 years and got it into a 7-figure ARR. And then I had to press pause again because I needed to figure out, well, what do I do with this product? I can continue running it on my own, but I was sort of bursting at the seams. I could take on venture money and try and bring it up to a Series A, B, and beyond, or I can try and find something in between. And so I stopped and pressed paused. I talked to a lot of customers who were using Status Hero. I talked to many advisors who I'd met throughout the years and decided to take on a seed round of funding to hire a really elite core team of experts in distributed work to help me build Status Hero 2.0. So Status Hero 1.0 solved a great problem for teams, but it didn't really solve it for organizations. And so the ambition with Status Hero 2.0, which became our current product called Steady, was to solve for this async coordination for whole organizations as opposed to just single teams. And so I've been working on that for the past couple of years, and we rebranded and launched Steady in January. I brought in distributed work experts, some who were at Constant Contact, others from GitLab and Basecamp and Microsoft, and we're working together to build Steady and improve Steady right now. So there's kind of two, I think, time to press pause inflection points there.
Bonus, two stories in one, which is great because obviously, based on what you said, the times that you press pause allowed you to evolve, to take that next step. Interesting. You said on the first one, the project was pretty much wrapped up, right? You had been acquired and you were doing heart surgery in the tool. And you said, I wanted to get back to working with my hands. Yeah. So you went from, managing, overseeing everything to, I need to get down and dirty again and really start from scratch. What were your thoughts around that? Why was that so important to you?
That's generally my roots. I mean, I started working in computers when I was a little kid. My father was a professor at the time, professor of civil engineering. And so we had during the 80s, when I was growing up, we had exposure to all these computers and stuff at home. And I learned how to program at a young age. And when the web came along, I really embraced that technology. And I liked working with it. I liked coding in the web, and I liked building web products. And so, over the years, I sort of elevated up the ladder to the point where I wasn't doing that as much and not enjoying that sort of hands-on feeling of being in control. And one of the things that I thought was a big advantage of mine when I was building Status Hero is that I could, because I had this technical knowledge of being able to do things with my own hands, like I could connect customer problems and issues really quickly with the product, like with a lot less abstraction and translation than usual, which I thought was, when I was thinking about this, what I was going to do next, and I was sort of listing the advantages that I had. Startup entrepreneurs always think about unfair advantages. What's the unfair advantage I had? And that is an unfair advantage that I have. Like I knew enough to build something on my own, and that allowed me to go fast and to really connect my knowledge of the customer and talking to the customer with the product. And that paid dividends when I was running the company on my own, because I would have a customer conversation and then, that would spark an idea about a change I wanted to make to the product. and I would implement it. And then I would go and get feedback from the customer about it, and they'd just be blown away. They were like, well, what? We just talked about this yesterday, and you're beta testing it with me now? And I'm like, yeah, what do you think? So I think that was one of the big drivers for me.
Certainly a lot of founders have that same mentality, right? The entrepreneur, the founder, it's just easier if I do it myself. But you did experience growth and you did start to build a team. I'm interested when you're talking about your second pause. So you had gone through an acquisition with Constant Contact, and I'm sure you learned a lot about the acquisition process, right? And I'm sure one of the things, as you said on your first pause, I wanted to be back in control. Now you've got this business, and what do? And you talk to customers, you talk to advisors, and you went for funding, you went for that investment. Talk about what you went through to make that decision, having been there in the past.
There's always trade-offs on everything and every decision an entrepreneur makes, or a CEO or any leader. And, I had biased a trade-off towards building stuff on my own, but also, I'm sure you've read, or your listeners are familiar with the E-Myth, right? Like I was making the pizza, right? Like I knew that there were smart people smarter than myself on different domains in which I could grow the business. And so I wanted to attract them. And I wanted to work with them, and I wanted to work with really smart people who could teach me something. And I think that's critical. And when I sat and did that exercise, I said, well, bootstrapping is not going to do it, because I'm going to need some oomph behind me when I go and try and attract this talent, so that I can say to them, listen, I'm building this thing, and it's not just Henry, and Status Hero, it's investor X, Y, and Z, and they believe in me and they believe in what we're doing. So come on board. So that was a big driver for how I raised the money. I also sought after funding that was aligned with my point of view on building the company and building it sustainably and profitably, and not just taking a seed round and pouring it into, demand gen and then hoping for the best and hoping we get to an A. Like really people who maybe wouldn't see the massive like swing for the fences payday, but would certainly be okay with a level of sustainable growth and profitability where I'm trying to optimize for revenue per employee rather than just a big revenue number that comes at the cost of massive churn or unsustainability.
I do a lot of work with PE and mergers and acquisitions, and there are investors that have different end goals, right? I want to turn around quick, or I really want to be involved and be a partner to see this grow.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different options out there.
Yeah. I mean, every founder will tell you, like, I'm after the smart money, but that definition is usually different founder to founder, right? And for me, the smart money was people who believed in me, people who knew what the unfair advantage of, which is that I'm not a 21-year-old YC Combinator person with an idea. I'm a seasoned entrepreneur. I want to build a sustainable business. I'm older. I have a point of view. We're building a product that has a point of view. And those are the things that we're gonna lever when we build this thing. And so finding people who are aligned with that was really important, and who had connections to help us grow along those avenues.
Absolutely. Yeah. Connections. And that was the next thing I was going to ask you about. I'm a fan of Constant Contact. It was a great 4 years for me. And you mentioned it throughout your story. What was the value when you went from, okay, I'm making the pizza, to now I need to find, and you said, a elite core team.
Yeah.
How important was your network at that time?
Yeah, critical. Absolutely critical. And again, it goes back to the unfair advantage of age, right? Like a lot of times being older is not an advantage. People are after youth for various reasons, but in this case, it was a lever. So having a network that I'd built up over the years, and certainly a lot of that was due to my experience at Constant Contact, because it was not a giant, but a public company that was part of a bigger ecosystem. And so I met a lot of very interesting people. I mean, we're having this call because of that experience. Yeah, the network is critical.
So one last question for you, Henry. What advice would you give other CEOs as to when they would identify it's a good idea to press pause?
My press pauses were, I think, probably more entrepreneurial than CEO based, but in my, just the past couple of years of working with these incredibly smart people, and this sounds like almost intuitive advice, but it's just so critical to double down on it. And that's to make sure that there is full transparency and context for all the people in your organization so that they can do their best work. Not holding anything back, constantly reaffirming the why behind what you're doing. At Steady, we talk about mission and value every week. Everything that we're doing, every GitHub commit can be traced all the way back up to our mission somehow. And I think that's really important for alignment to constantly reinforce that, but also the motivation for smart people. They don't want to put blinders on. Smart people don't. They're curious and they're going to ask why all the time. So being transparent and open and giving people full context is critical.
Your advice is to pause occasionally and make sure you're keeping on track with that kind of communication.
Yes. And I don't think it's necessarily pausing. I think it's just doing it all the time. We talk about this notion in our product called Keep a Steady Beat, which is a point of view around cadence on context and giving people context. And I think it's just absolutely critical that, weekly, daily, monthly, there's a steady beat of context within your org on what you're doing and what problems you're trying to solve and who you're trying to solve it for, and keep everybody curious and interested and on the same page.
Keep everyone curious and interested. Love it. Henry, I really appreciate you being here with me today on Time to Press Pause. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Time to Press Pause. For more information about Henry, go to steady.space. For more information about me, go to thesalientstrategist.com. And please listen to us again wherever you listen to your podcasts.